Hello, my name is Matthew. I was able to observe at East High School this semester with Mr. Demick in his U.S. History course. Most of the students in his class were ESL advanced students that were able to read pretty proficiently, and most of their errors were grammatically when they spoke. The other issues that Mr. Demick told me is that when he assigns writing courses or writing assignments, the students are able to use spell check and grammar check on Microsoft Word or Google Docs, and so most of the writing assignments are pretty clear of grammatical errors, but there are some issues that still linger in their writing assignments. The layout of the classroom is pretty much like any other classroom. My first day there, it was a new seating chart, so the students were in new areas, and it was a fairly quiet class. The students didn't really talk that much one to another. But over time, they got comfortable with each other and started talking. The classroom rule was that they were to speak English. Most of the students are Spanish speakers. Luckily for me, I also speak Spanish. So if they ever got caught up with anything, I was able to ask them a question in Spanish and they could reply. But soon after, we made it that if I asked them a question in Spanish, they would have to reply in English. That way I could give them a clarifying question in their native language, and they would have to respond back in their learning language or their second language. For the most part, all these students, again, were advanced, and the project that Mr. Demick had them do required them to greatly rely on their reading skills and their research skills, which was actually very cool to see while they were learning English. So for the first example, students were asked to read a lot of data about a certain issue or topic that was in their community or prevalent in their community. Students in the classroom chose to do about suicide prevention. And so they were reading a lot of data about how many suicides happen in Utah and in their communities per year. When I would ask them, how many suicides unfortunately happen in their community? One student replied 65,000. When responding to the number of 65,000. Even sometimes they would say 900, and this had me very interested. Mostly it was just a descriptive rule that they were breaking, where a normal native speaker would never say 65,000, they would say 65,000 or 8,900. The 8,900 is a little bit more understandable why they would break up the numbers like that, just because of the comma in the thousand, and the way we say it of 8,900 is a little confusing at times to students. But for the most part, I was able to correct this by just telling them, no, it's 65,000. I'd also ask them in Spanish what the number was, and they were able to respond what the number was perfectly in Spanish. And so being able to help them with this just small little descriptive rule that they were breaking was able to help them just a little bit more on how to correct their numbers. Never thought numbers would be such a prevalent issue in a history course, but luckily they were able to learn fairly quickly on how to fix this descriptive rule. For my second example, I was able to ask the student what they did over the weekend. They explained to me that they went down to St. George with their aunt and their uncle. When they came home, their mom asked them, "Why didn't you bring me any pictures?" And the student told me that, "Oh, I didn't bring pictures on my phone." Putting the word or the verb bring into past tense makes it the word bringed. Although this word isn't actually a word to be used in the English language, I was able to tell them that you didn't take any pictures on your phone. I explained that the word in Spanish for bring is traer, and the word to take in Spanish is tomar. And when I explained those different words to him, it made complete sense to him. And so he was able to correct his past participle verb of bring to the correct verb of take. He didn't take any pictures while he was out on his vacation with his aunt and his uncle. Along with the Generation Citizen project that the students were asked to do, they were also learning what the Common Core asked them about their U.S. history course. And so at the time they were learning about the space race and the Cold War for the U.S. And the writing example that I was able to get is talking about the world economy today and how the US is second to China. Mr. Demick, again, when I was asking for a writing example, explained that writing examples are fairly hard to find just because of Google Docs and Microsoft Word having spell check. But there is a small grammatical error in one of the sentences in the writing examples, and it says, "The two nations are competing to outdo each other by putting tariffs and not allowing trade." Putting tariffs is the grammatical error that I see in this sentence here. Instead of putting, it should be placing. And so instead of saying outdo each other by putting tariffs, it should be they outdo each other by placing tariffs and not allowing trade. The placing and putting is a very common grammatical error. Mr. Demick was able to tell me that instead of saying, place, you put something, or you don't place something, you put something. It's just a little bit more of an easier word to say, which has the same meaning. So putting instead of placing, in that grammatical sense, makes the writing a little bit chopped up. So putting a tariff on something instead of placing a tariff. It's a little bit more of a lower academic way of speaking, and which is fairly common in the grammatical writings that Mr. Demick asks his students to write. He says that the academic writing of his students is fairly low with the ELL students, and small little words of changing of the words in the sentence makes a huge difference for the students. Overall, I had a great experience with Mr. Demick and his ELL students in his US history class. Listening to the students and worrying about what they are saying really helped me create a bigger connection with the students and being able to build a little bit more trust with the students by helping them correct their grammar. It was a great experience.